Coding overloaded? What? What are you talking about? Don't be doing that. OBS. I don't want to hear it. Anyway, welcome back to Tailosive Tech live on YouTube. Hope you guys are having a fantastic Saturday. Hope you can stay safe out there for Halloween tomorrow. Hope you got some good plans, or some just safe plans. Not so much going on. That's fine too. Anyway, hope you're all doing well. Today we've got some leaks to dive into when it comes to the next generation iMac. So earlier this morning, Apple just discontinued the 21.5-inch Intel iMac, which I got to admit, like, a lot of people hated that, and, you know, I hate Intel, so I'm in favor of, you know, anything Intel-related getting off the site as soon as possible. That's all fine with me, but it's a bit of a soft spot. It's kind of a nostalgic factor for me because the first iMac I ever bought, I used iMacs before, but the first iMac I ever paid money for was the 21.5-inch iMac, and I always generally liked that design. Honestly, I would prefer, you know, an iPad Pro and a stick type design when it comes to desktops, but clearly we did not get that with the 24-inch iMac, and as you know, I'm if you've been watching me for a while, you know, I'm not a big fan of that 24-inch iMac design. I don't like chins, and I don't like white bezels. So it sounds like this iMac Pro is going in somewhat of a different direction, but it's kind of hard to tell. So keep in mind that the leaks we're talking about today are from Dylan KT on Twitter, so this is not an analyst, which means that you need to take it with a huge grain of salt. And I wanted to dive into basically what he said in this tweet, which I don't think all of it is likely, but a lot of it sounds fairly predictable / guessable. But either way, I think this is an interesting discussion that we could have about what we think may or may not happen. So Dylan, first of all, is saying that the term Pro is being used internally. So he's not entirely sure if that means that it's going to actually carry on into the launch of the iMac and they'll officially brand it iMac Pro. But to me, it makes a ton of sense because, as we've seen with the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips, they only put them in the MacBook Pros. They did not put those in the Mac Mini, and I have a feeling, I could be wrong, but I have a feeling it's going to stay that way. I actually think it was intentional that they did not put the M1 Pro in the Mac Mini, even though they probably could have very, very easily. I bet it was not a technical limitation. It was just kind of a price thing, and they didn't want the Mac Mini eating into iMac sales too much. And perhaps even the cost of the M1 Pro ended up being higher than they thought, and that's why they really only want to sell it in higher profit products like the MacBook Pro, which starts off at $2,000. So you've got a certain amount of profit margin with those machines, and that profit margin probably goes down a lot with the Mac Minis. So bringing it to a larger display, which Ross Young, who's actually a supply chain analyst who got the 120 hertz coming to the MacBook rumor correct, so I'm inclined to believe him a tad more. He's saying that Apple is working on a refreshed iMac that's still 27 inches, so that part of the report kind of surprised me. I thought, like, if we went from 21.5 to 24 inches, hopefully we would get 27 to 30 or 32 or something like that, but I guess they want to keep 27 inches the same for whatever reason. But Ross Young has said to expect mini LED and 120 hertz, which Dylan is basically reaffirming here, that this is a liquid retina XDR display. But the difference about this iMac is it's supposedly going to have black bezels, not white, which I take as a win. That's a good thing. As soon as we can get darker bezels on things, particularly with anything mini LED, that makes a ton more sense. Will I get it, Drew? Definitely not to keep. I'll probably get one to review, but after reviewing this Mac, I haven't reviewed it yet, I guess, but after using this MacBook Pro and knowing how much traveling and how active moving around our lifestyle is going to be in the future, I do not have a need for two computers. I already feel like my iMac Pro is kind of pointless in its current state. M1 Max is just so much faster, and I love the display on the MacBook, and it's mobile, so I can take it with me. And after the 24-inch iMac dropped, I've kind of abandoned my dream iMac concept of just having a really thin one-size bezel all the way around, because it seems like Apple wants to kind of embrace and endorse the chins of the world. But that's the interesting part of this leak. He said it's a similar design to iMac 24 and Pro Display XDR. So the 24-inch iMac has a chin, and the Pro Display XDR does not. So he could have just said it's a similar design to the Pro Display, and he didn't. So my theory is that the thing it's keeping from the 24-inch iMac is the chin. So that's my prediction running forward, is it will retain the chin, and that's where a lot of the components will be, but probably thinner bezels than the current 27-inch iMac. But luckily, no part of this leak says to expect a notch, which I don't mind on my MacBook Pro at all, because it's a specific aspect ratio where nothing... I don't think I've ever seen any video that's been shot at the aspect ratio of the MacBook Pro. So it never cuts in on content. It's embedded into the menu bar. So it's really not that big a deal. But if this iMac Pro is supposed to be a 16:9 aspect ratio, that means if you full screen content, which most content is 16:9, that's changing a lot, I know, with certain movies and shows. But for the most part, a lot of YouTube and you know, a lot of videos and TV shows are all still 16:9. If you full screen at 16:9, you are using every pixel. There's no black bars on the 24-inch iMac. So if you put a notch on that thing, that's that's definitely going to cut into more content. So I'm less okay with it basically on the iMac than I am on the MacBook, unless they tinker the aspect ratio just a tiny bit to make it slightly taller. Therefore, the notch will blend into the menu bar, and you'll just have some black bars when you're watching 16:9 content. But yeah, I don't know. Hey, Greg's Gadget says, what if it doesn't have the chin and it's 30 inches with 120 hertz? Would you really be able to turn it down, Drew? Well, the downside is it's not objectively going to do anything faster than my current MacBook, because according to this rumor, I guess I haven't got into that yet, the base model is supposed to be 16 gigs of RAM with 512 gigs of storage, so just like the new MacBook Pros, and also support M1 Pro and M1 Max. So in that regard, it doesn't sound like this is going to have any type of performance enhancement over the current MacBooks. Maybe people could argue because there's no battery to worry about, it can perform better. Thank you, Brain Freak, for the super chat. Blur looks nice. Good. Any news about the Mac Pro? Nothing new. If you've missed my earlier reports on the Mac Pro, you know, I tinkered with some OBS settings earlier, and I think the computer doesn't like what I changed, so I'm going to change them back. It's not a bitrate thing. It's just like a CPU usage percentage. I actually heard the fans kick on, and I was like, okay, something must be wrong, because I never hear the fans kick on. Anyway, it also, in this report, there's so much I got to get into. He's saying that this will start at or over $2,000, which also makes sense to me, because 120 hertz and mini LED is obviously, it drove the price up for the MacBook Pros, and the current 27-inch iMac, I think, starts way lower than it probably needs to now that the 24-inch iMac is a thing. So the 27-inch iMac right now with Intel starts at $1,800. But this is going to be a redesigned chassis with a new display and the new Apple Silicon that's much, much faster. So similar to the MacBook Pros being more expensive but better value overall. Like, they're still worth it to the pros because you're getting performance that you've never had before. I would anticipate $2,000 at least for this new iMac. Probably wouldn't be crazy to start at $2,100 or $2,200. Or the $2,000 iMac will have the binned M1 Pro. That wouldn't shock me at all. Like the 8-core version of the M1 Pro, which is not bad by any means. It's probably still faster than all the, or the majority of the base models that the MacBook Pro, that the current iMac sits at. So yeah, I don't think that's an issue. It's basically a MacBook Pro but a desktop, pretty much. Think of if they took all of the same specs of the current MacBook Pros and turned it into an iMac with black bezels, but some additional I/O. This is the part I actually don't think is likely, and I'll explain why. Dylan is saying they're going to bring the HDMI port, the SD card slot, and USB-C. Well, USB-C is a given. That's there now. It'll be there later. The part that doesn't sit right with me is HDMI. I don't understand why Apple, for the record, Apple, I don't think ever. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to think back because I've had a lot of generation iMacs over the years. Like, my family always bought iMacs growing up, and I don't think the iMac has ever had HDMI. So they're not bringing that back. Like, that because Apple's always viewed the iMac as like it's an internal monitor. It's like you can use it with external monitors, but that's what Thunderbolt is for. That's what thank you for the super chat, Vivek. Is the current M1 Max the highest performance there is in this generation? Keep up the good work. Thank you very much for the donation. I'm not sure what you mean by in this generation. Do you mean like all computers ever? In which case, no, I'm sure there's some super high-end CPUs and GPUs out there that could probably outperform the M1 Max. But in regards to better than performance of all Apple Silicon, yes, I think it's safe to say it's the fastest ARM chip you can buy. There might be some super secret computer for some companies that's hidden in a vault somewhere that's faster. But as far as ARM architecture silicon you can buy, I think M1 Max is the fastest. Not that I can't think of anything else that is higher, but you gained like 3,000 subs in just a few months. Oh, thanks, Virgil. I haven't grown my channel at all in the past year, so it's refreshing to see some new people. No iMac, never had HDMI. Okay, cool. Yeah, Greg's Gadget agrees. No way it will have HDMI. That makes the rumors sus. To me, that's why we should... I don't know if I mentioned this on the tech podcast or if we talked about it off the record. I can't remember. But in my opinion, moving forward, we need to start separating analysts from leakers. I think there is a difference, and I'm discovering this over time. To me, a leaker is someone that basically goes on Weibo or goes on Twitter and just sends out information. And maybe they have some track record of getting things right, so take a leaker's word with a grain of salt. But what I've seen a lot of accuracy with, especially with Ross Young, more so with Ross Young, you know, Quo gets a lot of things wrong, but he's still an analyst. He analyzes supply chains, which is he sees what Apple is ordering, what parts and components they're buying. That's a bit different than someone DM'd me on Twitter or I heard something on Weibo, so I'm gonna send it out. Like, I don't think HDMI makes sense on an iMac because it will most likely at least have 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, right? Like the MacBook Pros have 3. If anything, I could understand why they would want to put more on the iMac because, I don't know, I guess you don't have power to worry about because it's plugged in, it's a desktop, but maybe it's being used on more desk setups that are more likely to plug into RAIDs and external drives and that kind of thing. So having some additional I/O over the 24-inch iMac makes a ton of sense. I honestly see the 24-inch iMac I/O as kind of a downgrade because they got rid of a lot, but they didn't replace it with anything. They basically went from 2 Thunderbolt ports, which was there for the record, but before they released the 24-inch iMac, the 21.5-inch models, they had 2 Thunderbolt ports. And now on the 24-inch iMacs, they still have 2 Thunderbolt ports, but instead of 4 USB-As and SD and all that, and Ethernet built in, now you just replace it with 2 regular USB-C ports that are not Thunderbolt. I guess that's what they replaced it with, but I don't know. I guess SD card is a pro feature, so that's why they want to do it on this iMac. But HDMI makes very little sense to me. I could be wrong, but he also said that Ethernet on the brick is standard, which I guess makes sense. That implies if they are planning on going forward with, you know, Ethernet through the power brick. I'm kind of annoyed that iMacs have power bricks now. I feel like that's unnecessary. But I guess it's necessary if you got to have the design 11 millimeters thin. I just don't think that's important because it's a desktop. But that implies that this iMac will also be about 11 millimeters thin because they can't fit the Ethernet port on the back. So you have to stuff the Ethernet port into the power brick. But he's basically saying all the iMac Pros will come with the power brick with Ethernet. It won't be optional like it is with the 24-inch iMac. Isn't the entire pitch of the iMac that all you need is the iMac? Why have an HDMI port on it? I don't think Apple's ever been against you having external monitors with iMacs. They've always like advertised that they're capable of doing that, and they brag about how good Thunderbolt is at that. But to me, HDMI on the MacBook and on the Mac Mini is primarily because they know with the Mac Mini, you're going to be connecting this to an external monitor. And if you're buying a Mac Mini, you probably don't care much about that monitor, right? Like on an iMac, or a MacBook, you want like, I'm buying a all-in-one machine, so I want the display to be really high pixel density, really great dynamic range and all that. But with a Mac Mini, you're probably buying it because you want a cheaper monitor that's 1440p or 1080p, and you just need to dock it with a TV maybe. So they're like, okay, you're going to be using a lot of third-party monitors with this machine, so we put on HDMI. And it's kind of the same thing with a MacBook. Like, the use case I kept hearing come up was students in class wanting to present something off their laptop, and they want to connect to the projector, or they want to connect to a TV in the house, and they're like, okay, I finished this movie, let me show it on the TV. So you plug it into all these third-party. You don't really have that same argument with the iMac, though. With the iMac, it's stationary, it's going to be in one place, and it has a very, very good built-in monitor. This sounds like, I don't care about the chin very much, but this sounds like probably one of the best displays Apple's ever made. That includes the Pro Display, because the Pro Display XDR is still clocked at 60 Hertz, and it doesn't have as many dimming zones as a mini LED display. It's kind of a weird definition, I know, but for the most part, mini LED just means there's just over, I think the number, I could be wrong, but I think the number is you have to have over 1,000 dimming zones to be considered mini LED, and the Pro Display has like 500 or something. So it's technically not the textbook definition of mini LED, but the tech is very similar. Basically, it's an LCD with a backlit that is like a variable. Like certain zones of the backlight can turn on and off simultaneously, whereas a traditional LCD, you just have one backlight that's either on or off. So Pro Display XDR sucks now. I would say it sucks. It sucked from the beginning. I always thought it was kind of pointless. It was like too toned down to be a good reference monitor for a lot of studios, and too overkill for what most pros need. I don't think most, it's that weird middle ground of prosumer, and I don't think it was catering to prosumers, but the people who do need reference monitors and do need something that's that color accurate, they would be buying other things that have more options and more than just a few ports on the back. And I don't know, they had to compare it to a $40,000 reference monitor to make it look cheap, but specs wise I think it was missing a few of those advantages that studios use reference monitors for. So I never liked the Pro Display XDR price point. From a design perspective, I think it looks great. Like, I love having one bezel all the way around. I like the size. I played around with one at an Apple store once, and I thought it looked fantastic. I was like, yeah, this is great. I want a monitor like this. And I just said I would not pay $6,000 for a monitor like this, but I would probably pay like $3,000. Hopefully they do end up making an external monitor with mini LED and 120 Hertz, but we kept saying the same thing when Apple came out with the 5K iMac, and they basically never did it until Pro Display, which was a joke. So the iMac is going to be a better Pro Display with 120 Hertz refresh rate and a good computer inside for $3,000 less. Sounds too good to be true. I don't think it's too good to be true if you consider all the MacBook Pros have better displays than the Pro Display XDR. It's because this new display technology, mini LED, has become available, and when the Pro Display came out, it was not available. That mini LED was not being produced at scale yet. So Apple was using this kind of custom approach to XDR. Now, with mini LED tech, you can fit all of that extreme dynamic range and all of that peak brightness into a 4mm display lid, which I'm using right now, and these are in $2,000 machines. That includes the whole computer with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. So when you're designing the iMac, consider you don't have to include a battery. You don't have to include this big trackpad. You can just include the cheap little mouse. Charge extra for the trackpad if they want it. You can do an external keyboard, not an internal keyboard. So yeah, it makes sense to me that all this is becoming possible, but I certainly think a price hike is to be expected. But will the iMac ship with the cleaning cloth? Yeah, really, good question. Never complained about iPhones have the worst antennas in smartphones because we don't notice. Because it works fine. People all use a dock to reroute the port to the front of on iMac, so ports isn't a big deal for me. Dylan just kind of showed up out of nowhere. He predicted some stuff about the MacBook Pro, but still too soon to know if he is very accurate. Yeah, I would not put much faith in all these leaks. because they feel very uncertain. He's basically saying Face ID was tested but not confirmed. So I hate it when leakers do that because that's their way of saying it might not happen, but if it happens, I was right. But if it doesn't happen, I wasn't wrong. So whenever they make a claim like that, it's like they're not really doing much. Did you send me a fake WhatsApp number in Roman numerals? No, I actually have a video planned about that. YouTube has a serious bots problem. I will not select winners of any giveaway or any reward in my comments section. There's a lot of accounts that basically are pretending to be me. I will have a check mark in a gray bubble around my name if it's actually me. If there's no bubble around my name, I'm never going to tell you to text a number. I'm never going to tell you to click a link in the comments. You know, that's not that's not me. Okay, as long as the prices are the same with the MacBook Pro with the same specs, I don't mind a bit of a price hike. Yeah, I think given it's a mini LED that's 27 inches, it probably will be a tad more expensive than the MacBooks, but not much. No iMac Pro, please. Just a regular, bigger, and more powerful iMac. Well, you can call it an iMac if you want. Just don't say Pro. There's no way it'll have a notch. It's not like the bezels have to be that thin. That's the thing. They might try to make the bezels that thin. I don't know. But I don't think it will. I think the notch... Personally, I think the notch kind of made sense on the MacBook because of its aspect ratio. But I'm getting flashbacks because I remember everyone saying, like, no way the MacBook will have a notch. Like, that was not rumored until, like, the final week before the event took place. Like, for months and months leading up to the launch of the MacBook, and no one was anticipating it would have a notch. And then last second, it was like, oh, yep, it does. Virgil says he doesn't mind the chin. But I guess to answer Greg's Gadgets question from earlier, if it has a chin, it will be very easy for me to turn it down. I'm not I'm not interested in having a laptop and a all-in-one desktop simultaneously because that's kind of the situation I'm in right now, and it feels very redundant as is, especially if this one isn't really going to be much faster anyway. So I would be very interested in an Apple branded monitor that kind of looks like the Pro Display XDR, but it's a lot cheaper, because I don't want to get an external monitor that's not high refresh rate anymore. Now that I have 120 Hz on my phone and my iPad and my Mac, I don't want to dock my laptop to a bigger screen that's 60 Hz. So I want to wait until I see some good ones, because I've looked around for monitors with high refresh rate, and none of them look very good to me. They're all kind of ugly. Sunny Patel says, some guy replied to one of my comments on your videos saying that I won an iPhone. Yeah, I don't do giveaways. I'm sorry. But if anyone ever claims to be me and they're saying I have selected you for a giveaway, it's not me. YouTube has not done enough to address this. Let's see. If Drew's doing a giveaway, he will announce it. Yeah, I'm just telling you now, I'm not doing giveaways. It's like a fundamental decision we've decided on for the channel. It's never going to happen. Unless stated otherwise. But as of right now, there's no giveaways going on. If it has white bezels, I'm going to lose it. Yeah, me too. New Space Gray Magic Keyboard and Trackpad. Oh, that's true. The Space Gray keyboard and trackpad were discontinued. Wonder why they got rid of them if they were just going to bring them back later. Maybe they got to tinker them. They got to make one with Touch ID. Basically, take the keyboard out of my MacBook Pro and then sell that as a separate option. When is the next Apple event? No one knows for sure, but my guess would be late March. There's probably a spring event by what we're hearing. I'm struggling with my setup with my Dell monitor. Really want to use the MacBook as the main monitor and have the large one as secondary, but the setup is really weird. It says Eduardo. Yeah, I'm kind of struggling with how to set up mine because I'm not used to working on such a small display. It's funny because everyone's like, wow, the 16-inch is so huge, it's such a beast, but I'm just so accustomed to my 27-inch screen that I'm kind of having to cram a lot of applications together. Luckily, what I did last night was I realized I can make the text smaller, just like I do on my iPad and my iPhone. So I have the text put on the smallest setting, and that lets me fit seemingly, I know it's technically the same size, but it lets me fit seemingly the same amount of windows and content. So I've got OBS and the chat and Twitter and everything open. So it's kind of crammed from what I'm used to, but I would still like an external monitor of some kind. It's just the monitor I want doesn't exist. And you can't do target display mode. I think if I install Monterey on my iMac Pro, I can AirPlay to it from my MacBook, but then I'll lose a lot of the quality. Here's a wild idea. In preparation of a potential Apple virtual reality glasses, future iMacs will come with 2 cameras at the corners to enhance the future FaceTime 3D feature. That is a wild idea. I doubt it, but yeah, I think that's putting the cart before the horse a little bit. Chris Norton says, what are you talking about? I guess mostly what's in the title, which is 2022 iMac Pro leaks. Probably most of this is prediction that someone is trying to pass off as a leak, but I think that the predictions are fairly accurate. Tech Shorts, thank you for the super chat. I won a giveaway once. I won an iPhone 12 from Everything Apple Pro last year. Gave it to my sister because I already had the 12 Pro. There you go. Good for you. I'm just saying it was kind of funny because you specifically have said numerous times you won't do any in the future. Yeah, so I'm saying that now because I want people to know in the comments and stuff. If there's someone pretending to be me saying you've been selected for a giveaway, that's how you know it's not me. Or the gray bubble around my name. Apple needs to make their own budget external display instead of LG. Do they still even sell the LG monitors? I haven't seen them in a while, but I don't like the way they look. I know the panels themselves are good. Like, yeah, it's a decent pixel density and the brightness is okay, but they look like crappy Dell Optiplex monitors. I've used them. I've seen them in person, and the vibe, you know? Like, the aesthetics, to me, matter a bit because it's something you're going to have sitting on your desk. So, I don't care. It's not that I don't care about the chassis at all. I just I'm checking the site right now because I want to see if they're still selling it. Oh yeah, they are. Okay, LG Ultrafine is $700. Ultrafine 5K is $1,300. Yeah, it's just they look so weird. They've got like a big forehead. They're so boxy looking. I don't know. They don't look as clean. iMac will have a notch calling it, and it will have no chin. That would be interesting. It's like, well, we can't win them all. It's either got to have a notch or a chin. It'd be funnier if it had a notch and a chin. I'd only be okay with a notch if they up the aspect ratio a tad so that you can embed it into the menu bar. But if they're keeping the same 27 inches, 16:9 aspect ratio, then I'm less okay with the notch in that case. Because that's cutting into more usable space, whereas the notch on the MacBook Pro is more of a display extension, because if you turn it off, it basically turns back into the same old bezels from the last 16-inch MacBook Pro. And because it's like a slightly taller than 16:10, it's not a problem for me. But this is totally unrelated, but do you recommend me get the iPad Pro 2020 or 2021? Because I want to keep my iPad for 6+ years, and the fear of the slower CPU and less RAM is confusing me. I bet if you bought a 2020 iPad Pro, it would still get updates for 6+ years. That thing is still a beast. The M1 is kind of ridiculous in an iPad, to be honest with you. Especially with how crappy iPadOS is, with like trying to do anything that can take advantage of that power. It's like, I don't think the RAM or the CPU is going to make a difference of, oh, you get discontinued in 2027 instead of 2028. Like, 2020 is fine. Just save yourself some money. There's a pretty big price difference between the 2021 iPads and the 2020. So, will Apple break into the gaming industry? They're already there, Amir. They're in the mobile gaming sector, and they make more money than a lot of AAA game companies because of the App Store. They're just not in the PC gaming sector because that's not up to them. Apple can't really break into it. It's up to developers. It's up to game companies wanting to optimize their games for the Mac, and they've never been interested in doing that, and I don't think Apple Silicon will change their mind. Why does it look like botched portrait mode? I'm trying natural lighting in this. I just have my window open, so I don't have a studio light on right now. And then I have portrait mode turned on, so I can turn it off, but I don't know. There's nothing interesting back there. Why do you care a lot and pay too much for a Mac that doesn't game? Oh, this makes me laugh. I gotta read this. What is fun about video editing? Or people buy it because it looks good? Macs don't give you full computing experience. I like the idea that if it doesn't game, that be okay. Let me explain something to you. GPU stands for graphics processing unit, not gaming. There are more tasks for GPUs than just gaming. For one, gaming's a waste of time, for me at least. I know some people enjoy it and it's entertaining. You're welcome to do that. Spend your money on gaming machines all you want, but that's not how I spend my time. Nothing's fun about video editing. It's my job, dude. I got to edit videos to make content. And thankfully, you guys watch these videos. And that's what I make my livelihood doing, is making content about upcoming products or how I feel about certain products. And basically, it's a buyer's guide for people. So I don't video edit because I'm bored and I'm looking, and I think video editing's more fun than playing games. It's because it's my job. So the better computer you have with the more powerful processing power, the faster and the more efficiently you can edit a video and post it, which impacts my income. So it's just funny to me that there's still people out there that are like, computers are just good for running Fortnite. It's good for Counter-Strike. There is no use for computers outside of games. Like, you only buy a computer for fun. Computers are not tools. Video editing is a lot of work. Gaming is not a waste of time if you enjoy it. It's just a different form of entertainment. It's just not something I find much joy or entertainment value in. Referring to me specifically, it's a waste of time for me. I would not blow a bunch of money on a computer just as a form of entertainment. I'm buying it because I want a I want a tool that I can use for work effectively. PC does video editing and gaming. What is wrong with people paying $6K for limited computing experience? Because the PC is not as fast as my Mac, and it uses far more power. I cannot buy a PC that's a laptop like this that can edit videos because you don't have Final Cut over on PC. Final Cut is far more optimized for the hardware it runs on. I have used PCs in the past. They were unreliable, and their drivers corrupted constantly. There's a specific reason I don't use Windows, because I've tried Windows in the past, and I would have updates unconsensually. I would want to start work one day, and I'd turn it on, and it would just automatically have an update queued, and it would take forever. Or it would install some drivers that would break my microphones, and they would prevent video capture software from working. And PCs do not have optimized video editing apps that are as efficient as Final Cut. I have used PC video editing apps, and they're definitely not as fast. So you got to convince me, what does the PC have that my Mac doesn't that I care about? If your argument is video games, I'm not going to care. Tell me what PCs are good for outside of gaming. I'm a console gamer. I just don't have to worry much about replacing GPUs for $1,500. That's what my friend Ross is telling me, because he was looking to build his own PC, but he's like, prices of GPUs right now are insane. It's like crazy high because of all the crypto mining going on right now. Joshua says, you're paying for the quality of life and ease. The faster and efficient you push out videos, the better. I agree. It's been immensely helpful to have this tool in my life where I can edit videos really, really quickly and export them in minutes. On Windows, it would take hours. But Microsoft Paint. What do you think about 14-inch MacBook Pro baseline $2,000? Selling my 13-inch MacBook Pro i5 with integrated graphics. It sucked. Everything on it sucked. Yeah, that's definitely an upgrade. Like, I'm not gonna be in the camp of people that are like, no, you need a non-binned M1 Pro. Like, I think the 8-core M1 Pro is probably still plenty fast for what you need it for. I guarantee you it's much faster than your 2019 MacBook. So if that's all you can afford, obviously you'll get more if you're willing to spend more, but for the most part, M1 Pro, even the bin version, I think is going to be great. Do you think it is a little scammy when Apple announces features at their product launches, then not release them when they sell the product, e.g. Universal Control? That wasn't a product launch, though. That was an operating system launch. So I don't think it's that scammy, because the features they talk about usually do eventually come out. Sure, they're delayed sometimes, but no, I don't find it too scammy. With Apple Silicon, the argument that PCs are better is very hard. M1 Max is ridiculously better than any laptop. It's just going to get better with full-on desktops. It depends on what you're doing, but I would recommend the, whatever his name is, Guala Guala guy. When Apple unveiled these new MacBook Pros, they never for a single second demonstrated that these are good for gaming. That was not the intent. That was not the intended market. That was not the selling point of these Macs. That they've never been like, you should buy a expensive MacBook because it'll play games better. They never showed that. All of the use cases were 3D modeling, video editing, software writing, music writing, and game development. They showed a lot of game development software, but not a lot of... I don't think I saw a single time where they were like, this computer will be better at gaming. Like, that's... whoa! Holy crap. Vivek! That's an insane super chat. Wow, thank you. Didn't hate USB-C only MacBooks, but trying to output to an external monitor was so much pain. I despise the USB-C. The cables never do what they advertise or are only partially or for a short amount of time. Glad HDMI is back. I have never used HDMI a single time on this new MacBook, but I don't mind it being there because I don't have to use it. Something a lot of people fail to grasp. It's like, there's a feature you don't care about. You can just not bother it. But for the people that are mad that they don't have 4 Thunderbolt ports anymore, I implore you to ask yourself, what were you doing that required 4 full-speed Thunderbolt ports? And how many of those things were occupying your ports because you didn't have an SD card slot, or because you didn't have an HDMI port, or because you didn't have MagSafe? Basically, they dropped 1 port and replaced it with 3 of one of the most common ports that we had to keep using dongles for. So I see that as like, yeah, okay, you just saved a step. I was hoping back in 2016, you know, I didn't mind the USB-C MacBooks either, because to me, just buying 1 dongle is not that hard, and I can live with... I wanted everything to be Type-C in the future, and that's the future I thought the industry was going in. I was like, Apple's trying to push everyone to switch everything to Type-C. Monitors, drives, audio, everything. They wanted to become Type-C. And they tried this, thank you Benjamin for the super chat, they tried this for years. They did this for basically half a decade. They were endorsing all USB-C on MacBooks, and the rest of the industry didn't move on. Like, you have to draw a line. You have to draw a line at a certain point and say, okay, we've tried to get everyone to switch, and they didn't do it. So now having Type-C and only Type-C is just kind of a downgrade. It's a downside. It's a disadvantage to going with the laptop. And the short-term disadvantage was hopefully to get everybody over to Type-C, and it just never happened. So I understand why Apple went back on their word and decided, okay, legacy ports kind of make sense because we just could not get enough people switched. Benjamin super chatted. He says, what do you think is needed for gaming to come to Mac/iPad? I want Portal 2, Overwatch, Kerbal Space Program. Portal 2 is on Mac. I played that back when it came out. It's out of Apple's control. I've said this many times in the past, and a lot of people disagreed with me, but this is the whole Macs aren't good for gaming speech that Drew does on every live stream. Basically, it's up to software developers. Hardware has very little to do with a successful gaming device. Case in point, Nintendo Switch. The GPU and the CPU and the display on that thing, not that great. Some people would even say they're crap. But the Nintendo Switch is super duper popular because it has games that people like, and it has titles that there's a large fan base for. Does that fan base care that the games don't often play at 60 frames a second? Do they care that it's not running at 1080p? Do they care that the GPU is not that great? No, they don't. They don't care about all those things. They just care about, this is my game, I enjoy this game, so I'm gonna buy this hardware, and it's a Switch, so they can take it with them and they can dock it. So the Apple is not bad at Macs are not good at gaming simply because Apple doesn't have good GPUs. Like, even in my iMac Pro, like from 4 years ago, they had very capable graphics cards that could play games at decent frame rates. It's just that if you don't optimize your game to run on Apple's graphics engine, because they use Metal, and I believe PC uses OpenCL or something like that. They basically use a different architecture. And because there's not a bunch of gamers on Mac, there's not much incentive for software companies to optimize their games for the Mac, because they know we're going to have to spend money and time on our software engineers that are going to have to retool our whole game and have to redesign everything from the ground up to be optimized to run on metal. And how many people are we going to sell our game to on Mac? Because the Mac user base is more video editors, photographers, audio engineers. There's less of a gaming community there. So because the financials aren't there for the company, they don't have much optimization. So I think it's a very, very DirectX, thank you. It's a very, very common misconception that people think because Macs don't have the hardware to play games, that's why there's no popular games on there. It's more of a contractual thing. The main reason people are buying new Xbox or PlayStation isn't necessarily just because of the new GPU. It's because they've got the games they care about. I just had this talk with my friend Ross this morning while we were bike riding. I was like, he really, really is interested in the new Halo, and that's pretty much the only reason he wants to buy an Xbox. He doesn't care about the GPU or anything in it. He's just like, I want to get a Series X. Whoa! Oh my God. Benjamin! What is with all these super chats today? My goodness. Thank you, thank you. My opinion, all we need is one major new game to come to Mac and fully optimize for it, and that could start a snowball effect. Imagine, or Apple could do a translation layer for DirectX to Metal, like x86 virtualization. I think if it were that easy, it could have been done, but the primary problem is that there is not a large gaming market in the Mac user base. There's a few Mac users out there that like to play games, but not enough of them to warrant the software development and the money that would have to be spent to make those types of... I don't think it would be a snowball effect, personally. I think it would be an uphill battle. So it's like, okay, you got one major title, and you would have to blow all this money on optimizing that title to run on Macs, and then maybe you get a few people buying it, but the sales would likely be very, very low. That's the fundamental limiting factor, is that every time you would blow all your money on optimizing a game, you wouldn't see a ton of reward for it. So the game devs... It's not just like you design the game and you're done, right? Like, game devs know now, if you support a particular platform, you have to provide software updates, and you got to provide TLC, and you got to provide patches and bug fixes to that game as time goes on. So it's not just a matter of, okay, optimize this game for Metal, okay, now it's done. Now you've got to have a whole division of your software company all dedicated to optimizing and updating the games on the Mac. So I don't think it's a snowball effect. You would probably blow billions of dollars on trying to get major titles on the Mac, and you would not receive billions of dollars in revenue, because most of the people on Mac are not playing games. They're using them for video editing. Does anyone know how well terrible game emulators run on the ARM-based Macs? I think better than Intel, but still not great. Benjamin Superchat, what about iPad, though? Lots of people who want to game there. They do. They've got the App Store, and Apple makes a ton of money through that. It's just not... I don't know what games you're expecting. Like, are you saying we need to take PC games and put them on the iPad? Because games that cost more than $10 to buy on iPad's App Store, on the iOS store, tank compared to freemium and pretty cheap games. So this isn't something... I'm basically trying to tell everyone this isn't a Apple problem. This isn't something Apple can do. This is a market problem. It's a community problem. There's just not incentive for game devs to support their stuff over there because there's not going to be much return. Game development equals Mac is to gameplay equals Windows. What? Does anyone... Sorry, I read that one. Jasper Clark says, I play games on my Mac and cry. Yeah, they've always been capable of playing some games. It's just not as major titles that are available on PC, because that's where the gamers are. The gamers are also going to want, PCs that they can upgrade and take apart and rip open, and there's a huge community of people there that all compare graphics cards and CPUs and cases, and they want that kind of modularity. That's where most of the gamers are. I don't think there's this huge untapped market of gamers that would easily be blowing hundreds of dollars on titles every year, but they just happen to be on Mac, and because there's not enough good games there, they're not spending money there. It's our fault then. Exactly, Eduardo. Yeah. Macs aren't good at gaming because there's not enough people wanting to play. It's a death loop. It's kind of the same problem Windows Mobile had. They weren't that many people wanting to play. There weren't that many people on Windows Mobile, so there weren't that many devs trying to optimize apps and bring more apps to Windows Mobile. And no one wanted to buy a Windows Phone because there weren't any apps on it. So there's not an easy way to break that cycle. It's just a self-destroying prophecy. Oh my god. Benjamin super chatted. Civ 6 plays better on Switch than on M1 iPad. It's disgusting, but I feel like Apple could encourage it in the background, start paying devs to make game for Mac, and maybe take a loss at first. That's what I'm trying to tell you, Benjamin. They would have to take loss after loss after loss, and there's no guarantee they would make it back. That's the problem. You could blow billions of dollars and never see a return, so there's not much incentive. You keep assuming that there's just going to be this mass. That's the problem with all these people thinking Apple could do something. Apple should just pay some AAA game company a bunch of money to bring a popular game on the Mac. And I'm like, that's all assuming that there would be a ton of people willing to buy it, and I don't think there are. Daniel Holloway says, hope you're good. You're right, Mac has never been a gaming system. It's not the hardware, it's the developers. Yeah, they've had adequate GPUs that could handle games fine. They just weren't wanting to optimize for it. You loving Space Gray or missing Silver? I've actually gotten pretty comfortable with Space Gray. I like it on the new MacBook. I'm not really missing Silver that much, although I'd like to see one. I want to see what it looks like. Yes, I am loving it. What are people talking about? You can find them for $400. I don't know if it's worth it. Oh, over-ears? Have you talked about the iMac Pro leaks, or did I just join late? You did join late, but yes, we mainly talked about how there's a few leaks surrounding the iMac Pro 2022 variant, which is black bezels, probably still a chin, but it's basically, just imagine a MacBook Pro converted to an iMac, like M1 Pro, M1 Max, mini LED and 120 Hertz, which is cool. Unsure about Face ID. Based on Apple's response, they were in a podcast interview recently where they explained, someone asked them, like, why didn't you bring Face ID to the MacBook? And their answer was weird. Their answer was, it makes more sense to use Touch ID on the laptop because your hands are already on the keyboard. Which I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know. It didn't make a ton of sense to me as to why their argument. I think that it was kind of a bologna sandwiches counter. I think it was like, we didn't have a way to stuff those sensors into the display lid. But they didn't want to say that, obviously, because that makes them sound incapable and like, oh, we don't have the technology to do that. So instead, they're like, no, Touch ID makes sense for this system. You know, that's their corporate filter way of saying it. Benjamin Super Chatted says, I'm going to finish school soon. I'm going to do research and send you a strongly worded report because I believe there's a huge untapped gaming market. It's not really an essay that's going to convince me. It's data. If you could get like meaningful data, which I don't know how you could do, but the fundamental problem is the people buying Macs right now are buying Macs because they don't care about gaming. Does that make sense? If they cared about gaming, they wouldn't be buying Macs. That's the way I see it. They buy Macs because they game on something else. You know, I know a lot of people that are like, I play on the PlayStation and on my Xbox, but I'd rather just play on the Mac. And if you had some data that showed like a ton of Mac users using cloud streaming to play games off their Mac, that would be something. Like, look at all the people I have polled. If you polled, I don't know, several thousand verified Mac users, and they all said they would spend over $100 a year on games if they were available on the Mac. That's what you would need, which I don't know how easy that's going to be. I don't deal in anecdotes. I deal in facts and data. Well, good luck with the research report, but I don't believe it's something Apple can do. Otherwise, they would do it. If there was potential for them to make a ton of money, there's no disadvantage to them doing it. I'm buying a Mac for work and game on the side. Like, really on the side. Yeah. I think that's most people. The gaming market is huge. Apple could do something here. I think a lot of people don't understand Apple is very big in the gaming market. It's just not the PC gaming market. They make more money than most PC gaming companies on the App Store, thanks to the iPhone and the iPad. That's where most of their money is. The Mac has just become this little side business for them because of how huge iPhone and wearable sales are. They make billions and billions of dollars through the App Store just off games. So it's not the games you want, but it is technically, they're in the gaming community. It's just not the one you're thinking of. Have you ever tried DaVinci Resolve? I'm new to editing and I'm trying it on DR free version first. If you have tried it, do you like it? My friend Ross likes it a lot. He uses the color correction features, and my sister also uses it. I haven't given it a fair shot, but from what I've read, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe nothing has come close to kind of like the optimized playback of Final Cut, which is what matters to me the most. I'm not really interested in, okay, DaVinci has this one extra feature or something like that for color. Like, I don't care about that. I care about, like, how fast can this software edit and export a video. And if there's a reason to switch to DaVinci, like they say, hey, DaVinci can export videos of the same bit rate faster than Final Cut can, then I would be like, okay, I'll try it out if this can save me some time. But I haven't seen that so far. Pretty much seen, like, Final Cut's optimization is hard to beat. Apple has so much cash, they can give Call of Duty 1 billion. Say, give us Warzone fully optimized on our M1 Max, which is 3070 level, and bang, would be huge. Again, all of you are assuming that there would be $1 billion in revenue from the Mac community, and I'm saying that's not going to happen because the people buying Macs don't care about Call of Duty. Or if they do, they're going to want to play it on their Xbox or their PlayStation because that's connected to their TV. That's their gaming system. Apple makes more money in the gaming than Activision, Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft could combined. That's probably true. They make more money than all of those other studios because of the App Store being much, much bigger than the PC gaming market. Premiere Pro works great and is optimized for M1. I used to use Premiere Pro, but it's expensive. My God, the Adobe Creative Cloud, they get you when you're young. You know, I know a lot of you out there are probably on the student discount right now. I get it through school, or I get it because I'm a student or whatever. That's their goal. That's their plan. They literally try to rope you in when you're young so that you'll take classes on it and you get comfortable with it and you get all these I was in the same boat. I used Adobe Premiere and After Effects and Photoshop for years and years and years. And then when I got out of school, they upped my rates to $30 a month. And then once I started, you know, doing YouTube full time, they upped it again to $50 a month. It's like $50 a month. That was what ticked me off the last thing. I was like, I'm not doing $50 a month for this software. I'm looking for alternatives. And I found decent alternatives that mostly do the same thing. Sorry for the lag, but Benjamin super chatted, can you imagine if Apple added After Effects type features to Final Cut? Element 3D and Final Cut would make my day. I have too many Star Wars projects. That would be nice, but I appreciate Final Cut for its affordability. You know, I'm sure that After Effects and Premiere have these 3 or 5 features that everybody really, really needs and you can't get elsewhere. But for my workflow, I haven't found those features that are like, I really, really need this one tiny thing. I'm not sure about Sony or Nintendo, but it's definitely true Apple makes a lot of money off games. It's in the billions. And I guarantee you any potential game sales on the Mac is going to be insignificant compared to the game sales on iOS. So they would much rather blow all their money on arcade or promoting or having more fun with games on the phone because that's their larger platform. The Mac is just turned into this tool for the pros. How long did it take you to learn Final Cut? How did you learn video editing? It's something I really want to get into. I just use iMovie at the moment. Ask Samir. I didn't learn much. You kind of just play around with it. That's me with most software. Like, I played around with Adobe Premiere and After Effects. Occasionally, if you don't know where something is, you just go on YouTube and look up how to do one thing. But it's much, much easier to just have a goal in mind. Like, I want to make this video or I want to use this effect and then figure out how to do it. And along the way, you'll probably figure out a lot of how the program works. I never took a class on Final Cut. I never took a... Well, later on, after I'd taught myself Premiere and After Effects, I took a class in college that was just called film production. And a lot of film production was the professor teaching us Premiere Pro, but I already knew everything, so it was kind of a waste of time. I wouldn't put it past Apple starting to focus on partnering with gaming companies. They focused on very niche things in the past. Gaming's not a niche, though. Gaming's a big thing that I think they see a fundamental hurdle to get over. Like, if they were interested in focusing on gaming with their new Apple Silicon architecture, why wouldn't they have demonstrated that with the new MacBook Pros? I repeat again, they never once demonstrated at how the M1 Pro or M1 Max is better at playing games. Never brought it up. Not a single time. So if they were even remotely or mildly interested in getting into that field, why wouldn't they highlight that? Why wouldn't they say, with 120 hertz on the MacBook, you can have really high frame rates that are more competitive for gaming? Never did that. They could have, but they didn't bring it up. On M1 is niche. Yeah, it's something they don't even pay attention to. But thank you, Benjamin, for all the super chats to keep this conversation going. iOS trounces Mac in terms of revenue for games. It's a very expensive experiment that I don't think would pay off very much. I think people kind of are convinced that high-intensive games or AAA games are a significant portion of the gaming market in terms of revenue, when in reality mobile has kind of overtaken all that. Yeah, they used to advertise Fortnite on the older 2018 MacBook Pros. Now the GPU is better than it's ever been, and they don't bring up games at all anymore. Yeah, they briefly talked about gaming on M1, but not M1 Pro and M1 Max, which have substantially better graphics. To me, that's evidence that they do not care. They don't care. I wonder if they'd make a dedicated video game system that was essentially just a giant Apple TV. It feels like no matter what I say, people are convinced that Apple can do something to change the scenario. It's like, do you want Apple to just buy up like Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo? If they just bought all those companies and forced them to make games for Mac, it would be great. It's like, it's not gonna happen. I remember here, we've had this conversation for years, which is why I kind of have a more defeatist attitude towards it. I remember people talking about this way back in 2015 or 14. If Apple really gets into the gaming market, that could change things. If Apple bought this one graphics card, COD Mobile makes infinitely more money than the mainstream console and PC games. It's no shock Apple doesn't care about PC games. I know. Imagine a fourth tier of M1 between the base and M1 Pro called M1 Plus. That'd be kind of weird. I think you'd be better off just kind of... Thank you, Benjamin. I think they'd be better off just selling the binned M1 Pro at this point. It's like, we got to make a bunch of M1 Pros and not all of them have a high enough yield, so we just sell that into a cheaper system. That's kind of what already exists. I don't know if you need another middle step. There's way more options for the M1 Pro than I was expecting. I thought it was going to be like M1 Pro, M1 Max, and it'd be very simple configurations. But when you go in the 14-inch MacBook Pro configurator, oh my god. There's like 5 different CPU choices with different GPU tiers. He said, for some reason I want Apple to buy Pokemon. I want Pokemon and emoji. Oh god. Yeah, there's a lot of things I wish Apple would get into, but there's other fields that I think are potentially much more profitable. The gaming one, I think a lot of people seem to have it convinced in their mind is a big market relatively, but it really isn't, to be honest. The sad thing, most people I know in the gaming community are kind of like mad at everything all the time. It's like with all the directions EA and Activision and Epic Games are going in, everyone's just kind of like mad. Whenever I talk to people in the gaming market, I'm always like, how'd you feel about this? They're like, oh, it sucked. I didn't like that one. Oh, this one you got to pay more for now. Oh, they got to sell you all this DLC. Oh, this new game that I was really, really excited for is really buggy. I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of good I don't hear about, but I certainly feel like they're just angry all the time. Every time I have a conversation. Oh, my God. Why is M1 Max more expensive? Because it's bigger? And it uses more cores, more internals. Make a more powerful GPU, it's going to cost you more. Why don't Apple give us desktop experience on iPhone like Samsung DeX? Probably because they don't see much of a use for it, and not that many people would use it. It's my theory. I feel like all caps can be used maybe once. You don't have to... I guess he used it more than once. Sorry, Benjamin. Careful with the all caps. but thank you for the super chat. Did your iMac Pro retired? It has some old projects on it that I just finished up for Tailosive TV. I think I'm ready to officially, you know, get it all set up for selling it. Croztech says you're right. Gaming has been disappointing for the last decade. I'm sorry. It's not that I take pleasure as I laugh. I'm not happy that it's going poorly. I just sometimes kind of laughed at unfortunate situations or disappointment. Kind of is hilarious to me. But I just hear people complaining about different game companies or different game titles all the time. Apple is probably not interested because it's likely that the effort and cost for supporting all the typical PC games would not be worth it compared to the revenue you get from iPhone and iPad. Basically sums up what I've been trying to say this whole time. You never shouted me out when I became a member on the Apple event day. I didn't? I'm sorry, Halmy. There was a lot of people. There were like 90 new members that day, so I apologize. But thank you, Halmy, for becoming a member. Appreciate it. I'm going to try to sell the iMac Pro. It's not a guarantee. Like, if I'm not able to find a good amount for it, I don't want to sell it for dirt. It is worth something to me because my wife potentially wants to use it. She's kind of interested in keeping it, but I would obviously rather have the money to help offset the cost of this expensive MacBook. So basically, if we can get a decent amount for it, I'm willing to sell it. But if we can't get a decent amount, then I'll just hold on to it. When do you think Universal Control will come out, and will you use the easy reset feature in Monterey for selling your iMac Pro? Absolutely. That's not a feature you use all the time, but the easy reset feature I'm so glad is on Mac now. That's going to make selling the iMac much, much easier. Mac Mini with M1 Pro at $1,100, your opinion? That would be a great video. I think the problem is that would be too good. I think I've talked about it in previous videos. Whoa! Oh my god. A bird just like flew into my window. That scared the crap out of me. Oh, I gotta watch the replay of that. What did it look like? That was a big bird. Okay, I guess my reaction wasn't that interesting. If this iMac has a chin, then I will not buy it. 30-inch screen would be nice, and no chin would be perfect. No notch under any circumstances. I'm sorry, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed because I have a pretty strong suspicion. Not that this leak should necessarily be trusted, but I have a hard time visualizing if Apple took the 24-inch iMac in the direction they did of making it super thin. Why wouldn't they do the same thing with the bigger iMac? Which means if it's got to be thin, you got to store the M1 Pro and M1 Max in the chin, basically. Easy reset only works with T2 and up. Does the iMac Pro have a T2? I thought it did. Did it not? Let me check real quick. Sorry, Starlink is lagging. Give it a second. I thought it did. Yeah. Yeah, it says, I think it says iMac Pro. It has the T2 security chip, yeah. Why does it need that, though? Why do you need the T2 to do a factory reset? When can we expect my MacBook Pro review? I don't know. I kind of want to put it through its paces. I've been, like, there's a lot of different workflows my daily Mac goes through between recording 3 podcasts a week, doing like 4 live streams a week, and editing and exporting 10 videos a week. So there's still a lot I guess I'm playing around with and trying to get a feel for, but probably when I get back from my anniversary trip, so maybe mid-November, probably a couple weeks. Thanks for making it up. It's pronounced halami. You've gotten it right before. Halami, okay. I hope I got that. They've been working on iMac Pro since the beginning of this year, as per my Apple source. Interesting. They have been working on this computer for some time. I believe it. Why did they not add Cellular to the MacBook Pros? I'm still wondering that myself. Like, if they can bring it on the iPads. I have a few running theories. They're not factual or based on any type of research, but one theory I had is it might have something to do with the carriers. The carriers might see the iPad as more of a general media consumption device, so they just kind of see it as a bigger iPhone, but the carriers realize, similar to what I'm doing right now, the Mac is used for more productivity tools. It's used for live streaming, it's used for uploading content, and It would be a heavier drain on their bandwidth if they started offering cellular. So maybe there's a chance that that's why they don't want to do it, and Apple maybe wanted it, but the carriers didn't. I don't know. But yeah, it would be great if they did. I would rather just hotspot personally, but do you think Intel and AMD are going to try to compete with Apple or just accept defeat and target a different market than Apple? At this point, with how impressive the M1, M1 Pro, and M1 Max chip are, I think they're just going to accept defeat. Like, I thought it was really funny when some guy was in an Intel interview or something, and he said, like, we hope to win Apple back by making better chips. And I was like, then why are you making all these anti-Apple commercials? If you want them back, don't be pushing them away with the marketing, because that's a terrible idea. But I think, I'm not an expert in this field, so this is very theoretical of my view, but I think what a lot of AMD and Intel have to do is they design a lot of chips and a lot of their GPUs or integrated GPUs optimized for a very large user base, right? Because with PCs, they're like, we got to make this good at exporting videos or gaming or all, you know, just a big laundry list of features that people use their computers for. And Intel and AMD are working between all of these different types of laptops. Some laptops are big, some are small, some have high power consumption, some have low power consumption. So when you have Intel and AMD designing silicon and designing chips for all of these different roles, you can't make something that's like as well optimized across everything. Whereas Apple, the reason they're able to get so much better performance and so much better battery life is because they know exactly what machines the silicon is going into. They know exactly, like, okay, this is going into a MacBook Pro that's going to have a 140 watt power brick, and this is going into a MacBook Pro with a 60 watt power brick, and it's going to be this thin, and these are the thermals we're working with. So when you know your exact parameters, because Intel and AMD have like 1,000 different machines they got to optimize for, whereas Apple is going to have like 3 or 4. Some with fans, some without fans, but for the most part, Apple can optimize and design their chips specifically for their hardware, which means that I don't think there's a high likelihood that somehow miraculously Intel would start making chips that would be better for Apple's Mac, because that's one parameter, whereas there's all these other computers Intel is designing for. So it's kind of like the in-house advantage, because Apple is controlling this design from the bottom up. They get to optimize their chips to work perfectly well for their scenarios they're in. So I don't personally think it's likely that there's suddenly going to become some Snapdragon or AMD ARM architecture that's way better than Apple silicon, because Apple has Crazy Bunny, for one. So the best next generation, most advanced silicon in the world is probably going to debut in an Apple product before everything else. And any other company that designs one is got to try to optimize it and scale it for all these different machines, whereas Apple just has a handful to control for. Will you play a remastered version of the GTA trilogy? No, I never played it when it was new. Yes, Apple's more vertically integrated in terms of design. Not so much vertically integrated in terms of manufacturing. They outsource that a lot, but that's actually something I think they should get into personally. Like the reason Samsung can include display tech or include certain hardware before everybody else can is because Samsung is a manufacturer, not just a distributor and designer. That's why, in case some were wondering, like Samsung can get OLED displays before Apple or 120 hertz LTPO panels before Apple. It's because they are the source of those displays. They make them themselves. Apple has to buy all of those components and all of those displays from somebody else. So Samsung can release the Galaxy Note 21 or 20 or something because they know it's going to sell in fairly low volume, probably less than 1 million units a year, and they can produce enough of those 120 hertz displays on that phone. But if Apple wants 120 hertz, they got to buy like 50, 60 million of them. So if Apple comes forward and says, hey, does anyone have 60 million 120 hertz OLED displays? He's going to be like, no, we don't have that many. So you got to wait until production can be scaled up by somebody else. So I think it would be a good idea for Apple to get into the vertically integration of the manufacturing side of things. What you said right there, Drew, is why Apple would be ideal and amazing for PC level games. On a technical level, I agree. If you optimized a game, a AAA title, it could be, you know, GTA 6 or whatever, something crazy, intensive. Yes, you can optimize for the Metal engine and have a great gaming experience. But from the beginning, I've always said that's not the problem. It is not a hardware problem. It is a market problem. The money it would take to develop those games and optimize them would not, you would not recoup the cost from the number of sales you would get. Apple doesn't need another Pippin-like fiasco. Yeah, it feels like over the past few decades, they've tried many, many times to get into the gaming industry, and it's just never worked. But also, like, does it matter? Really? At the end of the day, for their company, like, business-wise, they've done great. Like, they're the first $2 trillion company, I believe. Yeah, they're at almost $2.5 trillion in market cap. They're having record quarter after record quarter after record quarter. They're, like, financially, they're doing great. So what is this logic of just like, well, it could be more? They could have been a $3 trillion company if they bought Halo and kept it. Does anyone got 120 hertz displays? The market when you're selling the Big Mac. What's going, Space Lord? Welcome. These MacBooks will last like 2012. MacBook lasted? Do those last a while? I don't remember. I just know that there's a lot of ARM architecture devices that last a very, very long time. Would you recommend upgrading to the M1 Pro chip from a 2019 16-inch? If you need it, like, obviously, financially, probably the better thing to move is if your current Mac is working fine and it gets the job done, then just hold on to it until it stops working, because these MacBooks will be available for certified refurbished later. They'll go on sale. You'll be able to get cheaper ones. But if there's a new feature or new performance thing that you care about, you can afford it. Like, if you really, really want 120 hertz on your Mac, then, yeah, go for it. Worth is subjective, people. When do I think we'll see micro LEDs? They're kind of like unicorn tech at this point, because I think I remember making a video in 2017 about micro LED coming to market. And here we are in 2021, and we're still like, when are we going to get micro LED? So I'm like, if we haven't gotten it yet, I'm convinced it's going to be a while. I do not think Apple needs to get into the gaming space. I would like it, but doubt it. They don't need to. Yeah, it's just all kinds of markets I would love Apple to get into for my own personal reasons, but they likely have financial reasons for not doing it. Like, I've said it before, whenever people ask me, like, Drew, what service or what industry do you want Apple to enter? My top choice has always been camera market, not just iPhone camera. I've toyed around with the iPhone ProRes feature, and I've done cinematic mode, and I've seen the raw data capture and all that. It's all great for a phone, but it's never, you notice they don't film the Apple events with their iPhones, right? Apple commercials, if they are shot in iPhone, they bring it up, but most of the time they're not. So Apple admits and acknowledges that there is a huge number of cameras and lenses that they gotta film in order to attain their top quality. Like, all of the Apple TV Plus shows, none of those are shot on iPhone. They gotta get these dedicated camera rigs to get really, really cinematic looking shots and really, really high quality images. And I get that they want the iPhone camera to just get better and better and better, but it's still always going to have to be stuffing all of these lenses into this tiny little corner of your phone. And that's just never going to be able to fully replace dedicated cameras. I know for point and shoots, yes. For the average consumer that's like in Disneyland or whatever, and they want to take pictures of their kids or, you know, a simple vlog, the iPhone camera is great for what it is, but it has not killed off the purpose of studio cameras, and Apple knows that. And unlike the gaming market, where you guys are like, oh, we got to switch the Mac to become a gaming machine, where I'm like, I don't think there's going to be that many sales. I don't think they would see much money. They wouldn't get much financial return for that. However, in the camera market, that overlaps a lot with the Mac market. There's a ton of Mac buyers out there that are photographers, that are videographers, that shoot movies, that shoot YouTube videos, and they all use a Mac. So that market, to me, overlaps a lot. Less so with the gaming thing. I don't think the intense gaming market overlaps very much with the Mac market. There is some. I see you, Ben. I see a few of you in the live chat. You know, it's like some of you would spend some money, but I don't think that's most. Benjamin, thank you for the super chat. What iPadOS feature do you want most? Honestly, at this point, it's a software compatibility problem. Give me gaming and Final Cut. It's got games. There's just not the games you want. And a lot of the games you want are tied up with contracts with other companies. So I would like Final Cut. I would love to see that. Dual boot. I know this isn't the answer you want, but dual booting macOS option I think would make the iPad a lot more practical. I could see a ton more people buying the iPad Pro if it had a dual boot to switch it to macOS. A lot of wedding people use MacBooks. Would be nice to pair that with a dedicated Apple camera. Exactly. Dude. Almost every photographer, professional videographer person I know uses a Mac. And tons of YouTubers use Macs. I bet the market share between PC and Mac, I'm sure, is like 80 or 90% Windows. But if you went into the YouTuber market, I bet it's more like 50% use Mac. Another super chat from Benjamin. Apple should make a line of cameras to compete with Sony Red and Blackmagic. Can you imagine an Apple-made camera with AirDrop? Shove that in my vein. I did a video on this a while back because I do think it's an industry they could disrupt very easily. Like, they've already got the amazing computational photography of the iPhone. Think of the deep fusion tech we get. There it is. Thank you, Benjamin. Think of the amazing silicon they designed. That's a big problem I have with my current camera. Something that's made me consider buying a different one, or I'll probably just buy another battery. But Apple has very, very efficient silicon, which does tie into camera performance, because a lot of the time what allows for a camera to shoot at 60 frames a second or 120 frames a second is having a CPU on board that doesn't get too hot and doesn't draw too much power. You have to rev up the computational side of things to get those high frame rates or to get great bit rate and lossless video capture and all that. Apple could directly take the M1 or take, powerful silicon. Maybe they could design a whole different brand of chip that's optimized for cameras. They could bring that to a dedicated, something that's not meant to be also a phone. Because right now, if you look relatively, like, I don't have my phone with me because I've been using my MacBook all day, but the amount of space they have for cameras on the iPhone is relatively very, very small. Like, if you see an iPhone tear down, it's like tiny, tiny corner. And you've got to optimize your silicon for all the other things, the iMessage and gaming and Twitter and, so a lot of computational advancements in the silicon does help the photography side of things. I would just love to see what Apple could do if it was like, now you can use full grade lenses. Now you can use actual studio quality things. And I know a ton of studios that produce Netflix content and Disney Plus content are doing a lot of their video editing on Mac. So if you had a way to like airdrop your pictures or airdrop your videos from the camera to the Mac, oh my God. That's what Apple should have done, in my opinion, when they got rid of the SD card slot on the MacBook. Like, they brought it back now, but I honestly think they could have tried harder to replace the SD card slot. They didn't really do enough. Like, they were like, that's okay, SD card slot is in the past, now we can move towards on a new standard, but Apple didn't really provide a new standard. All they said was like, plug in your camera via Type-C. But that's not practical for a lot of us because we have our cameras attached to tripods. So it's much more practical, instead of moving the whole camera or disconnecting the entire camera, especially the Red camera me and Ross have been shooting with. That's impractical to take the whole camera and bring it next to the computer, or take the whole computer and bring it next to the camera and plug it in that way. Apple could have entered this space and competed with Blackmagic and Red. And I think that would have probably, the reason they don't do it is probably because it wouldn't make as much as other industries they're getting into. Tim Cook is trying to prioritize wearables and services. From a financial standpoint, it probably is much, much smarter to go after those. I bet the camera market wouldn't make Apple very much. But on the subject of, Drew, what do you think Apple should get into? That would help me the most personally. on a subjective basis, that would make a big difference to me. So, yeah, I would love a little Apple DSLR camera similar to my Blackmagic that has very intuitive, software where it still gives you a lot of control over what you want to do, but It's easy to navigate, and it can get software updates over the air, and you can connect it to your phone, or you could connect it to your Mac and make it your dedicated webcam for content creators out there. Like, I feel like Apple should throw a bone and be like, hey, we know there's a lot of Mac users that either live stream or make content from their desk. So if you could just instantly have a feed through Thunderbolt, right? Give the Apple camera Thunderbolt 4. That supports very, very, very high bandwidth. So if you plugged in a Thunderbolt cable from the camera to your Mac, you could record freaking 4K at 60, probably 8K at 60 video directly into the Final Cut timeline. Bypass the SD card process entirely, right? Like, instead of writing all this footage to a tiny little SSD that you could lose and might break, and then having to take the SSD out of the camera and then plug it into the computer, instead, let me record videos at a high bit rate with great dynamic range, high resolution, high frame rate, feed that directly into Final Cut, so that as soon as I hit the stop recording button, it's already in my timeline. There was no import process to worry about. Like, to me, that would change the movie making game. That would change the YouTube game, as if you could bypass a lot of recording like that. It's like, I've got an 8 terabyte SSD in my laptop right here, and I've got Thunderbolt 4 ports on the side that can do like 40 gigabits a second, and I've got a really nice camera. Even my Pocket Cinema even has a USB-C port. I don't think it's Thunderbolt, but you know, it's not inconceivable that you could put a high bandwidth port on a camera. If Apple kind of started supporting that software to allow it to write right into Final Cut, I think that would make a big difference. I want Apple to buy up Facebook, Meta, and delete it. There you go. iCamera now starting at $3,000. Yeah, I know it would be expensive. I'm not trying to say it would be affordable, but I think it would be useful. Like, people would be willing to pay it if there were a bunch of exclusive, like, if you're using this camera with a Mac, it can do XYZ. I can snap with my DSLR and it imports directly. That's awesome. Did the iMac Pro leak? Just some basic specs. We talked about it mostly at the beginning of the stream, but the main thing to keep in mind is it's still 27 inches. It'll be mini LED with 120 hertz, but the current leaks are saying black bezels, not white, and this will be a Pro branded product, so makes sense for the black. So far, no leak has alluded to there being a notch, so I would say thinner bezels than the 27-inch iMac, but still a chin, and it would get the M1 Pro, M1 Max chip, and probably an SD card slot, and Ethernet in the power brick, just like the 24-inch iMac. Do you think if Apple added USB-C to iPhones, then people wouldn't have cared about MacBooks only having USB-C ports? No, that most people were mad about USB-C on the MacBooks for other reasons. Like, they were mostly mad about, like, I gotta buy adapters to use HDMI, I gotta buy adapters to use SD card slot, or a lot of people were just diehard MagSafe fans. I never really cared that much for MagSafe. Now that I have it, I still don't really care much about it, but if I'm gonna have it, I like that it's braided. You know, I would have just appreciated any charge cable that came with the MacBook that's braided, but I'm okay with them ditching one of the USB-C ports as long as the most popular ports we had to use with USB-C are provided. So I didn't care as soon as they said you can still charge it with Type-C. I was like, well, that's what matters. As long as I can take my iPad charger on a trip and that iPad charger can also charge the MacBook, then great. I don't care. The only thing I was worried about is that MagSafe would be the only way to charge it, or there wouldn't be a USB-C port on the other side, but there is a Type-C port on the other side, so whatever. What do you know about mining? I hear you can't do it on any Apple products. I've done it a long time ago. I've mined a bit of crypto with my iMac Pro, not very much, but let's see. Phone battery's dying, gotta leave early. Oh, August Amberson, I forgot. August Amberson made the little concept artwork in the thumbnail for today's stream. So thank you, August, for making that. Basically just did like a space gray 24-inch iMac back, but I thought that looked really good, so I was like, this'll be a nice thumbnail. Let's see. What camera are you using? Oh, this is the MacBook Pro. I'm using the onboard microphone and the built-in webcam with the portrait, not portrait. Is it portrait? Or is it just called background blur? I can't remember. Yeah, it is portrait. It's not super fancy, but I like the way it looks, so. Yeah, this is the built-in mic on the MacBook, for those who weren't aware. When they first talked about USB-C on the 12-inch MacBook, they showed the port and said, this one port will work with all your previous ports. So I thought it meant you could just plug anything in. No. Oh, that's funny. No, I was all on board with it. I liked the idea. I remember when the 12-inch MacBook came out, I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get everything on one standard, because I liked that. What I liked was the idea of Type-C. The execution, unfortunately, wasn't the grand vision, I think, of what Apple wanted, but I think they're partially to blame to that, because if they really wanted Type-C to be the last port, the port to replace all ports, they should have brought it to the iPad sooner, and they should have brought it to the iPhone, period. Like, the fact that we're in 2021 and they still didn't bring it to their AirPods, to the... Even the Magic Keyboard and Magic Mouse still use Lightning, which makes no sense to me, because the iMac went all in on Type-C this year, but they still put Lightning on the keyboard and mouse. Like, I don't get it. They could have done more, basically, to help accelerate the transition to Type-C. But I like the fundamental concept that in the future, TVs, monitors, headphones, external drives, eGPUs even, like just everything, all our phones, all our tablets, all our accessories, all use Type-C. So that way in the future, it's not like, which port does this plug into? It's just, you plug it in. You don't think about which port you're plugging into. That concept I like the idea of, but I think Apple was attempting too much, because they couldn't get the rest of the industry to move on. And like I said, I think Apple didn't try hard enough, but if they could have gotten more companies and more of the industry moving everything towards Type-C, it would have been a different world, but that didn't happen. Don't think that the iMac Pro will be any different from the 24-inch iMac, apart from bezel color, just like the previous iMac Pro. That's my running theory. It's not what I want. I want there to be a no-chin, thin bezel all the way around, but the more I'm reading about it, it sounds like that's not the case. Although Dylan is not a super reliable leaker, which is what the leaks were coming from today. So, yeah, it's kind of what I thought. But I've kind of given up on that whole dream iMac design I had in mind a year ago or so, because me and my wife want to travel more. So I'm pretty set on keeping this MacBook, and this is going to be my workstation. Although maybe eventually I'd want to find a good monitor to plug into it, but can I take you to a Leafs game? I don't even know who that is, so I don't think you'd enjoy it very much. I have the MacBook sitting on a box so that the angle is better. I don't know. I gotta wrap up here soon, but I could show you guys what it would look like without the box. Let's see. Pivot this up a tad. So if I put it down like this, this to the ground. This is how it would look if I just left it on the desk. I guess it's not that bad, huh? Do y'all prefer this look? Thank you, Ryan. I too would also be down to buy an Apple DSLR. I would be willing to spend thousands of dollars if they made one, but they probably aren't going to. I just want to know when PC Steam games will come to Macs now that they are getting way more. Oh my God, Jonathan. It's never been a hardware problem. Oh my God. Yeah, maybe the box is pointless. Maybe I should just leave it like this. I don't like this bezel thing they're going after. White equals you poor. They're not really going after it, though. The 24-inch iMac is the only recent generation Apple product to bring back white bezels. The iPhone SE could have kept white bezels, because the iPhone 8 that it replaced had white bezels, but when the SE came out, they got rid of it. Only black bezels. And then the iPad 9 that came out not long ago used to have white bezels for the silver and gold options, and now, whether you get silver or space gray, they're all black bezel. That's the cheapest iPad. That's probably like one of the cheapest computers, standalone computers you can buy from Apple. So you poor, but you still get the black bezel. Thank you, Joe. Giving the iPhone USB-C would have been the deciding factor for the USB-C future. Truly the biggest missed opportunity in recent memory. I don't think it's that alone. Even if the iPhone had USB-C, there still would have been a lot of monitor companies and camera companies that wanted SD card slots and stuff. But don't mind, but the up-high makes it look like a real camera. Okay. MacBook Air M1 versus 14-inch Pro. Thinking I might upgrade. Worth it? Just keep in mind they're very different weights. Do you want a thin and light notebook, or do you just need more power? If you to me, like, I keep reminding people, when I reviewed the M1 MacBook Air, that thing was insanely fast for what it was. It wasn't faster than my iMac Pro, but for most people, the M1 is perfect. I would say for most people, the M1 is overkill. If you're planning on doing a lot of video editing or more graphics-intensive things, then maybe consider the M1 Pro. But I guess the only other reason, if performance doesn't matter to you, is just do it for mini LED or do it for 120 hertz or that kind of thing. But M1 MacBook Air is an amazing deal. iPads are called iPads, not computers. Macs aren't called computers either, technically. Wonder how much each proprietary Lightning iPhone release generates in royalties alone. I think it's like $4, but there's not that many. I hate that argument because people keep saying Apple makes too much money from Lightning. It's like, if you look at their finances, if you look at their income sheet, the Lightning revenue is insanely low. It's practically nothing relative to the rest of their revenue. It's like $4, but how many third-party Lightning cables do you guys actually use? Or do you just use the Lightning cable that came with your product? Like, I'm sure there are some, I know there are some companies out there with their own version of Lightning, but they're not selling at high volume. I don't think Apple makes a ton of money off Lightning. Why won't PC games come to Macs if it's not a hardware problem? Because hardware is one piece of the puzzle, software is the other. They could have brought PC games to Macs a long time ago, but they didn't because they didn't see much revenue potential there. I've made this video before, but I feel like no one hears me whenever I do it. I'm always like, hey guys, it's not a hardware problem. It never has been a hardware problem. You can have very, very popular gaming devices with crappy hardware, like the Switch or like the DS. You don't need big GPU isn't the requirement for gaming. It's software optimization. I have more third-party cables than original ones. Really? Okay. Interesting. They keep digging themselves a bigger hole by keeping Lightning on newer products. They're kind of screwed either way, though, because if they switch away from Lightning, everyone's going to get mad about all their Lightning cables not working, so nothing they do will make people happy, but I think USB-C is still the right call, even if it ticks off the Lightning fan base. Anyway, I got to get going here. I've got some more videos to make, but I appreciate all of the insane super chats today. Seriously, thank you, everybody. And I hope you have an excellent weekend. Happy Halloween. Stay safe, and thank you guys for watching and tuning into this stream. Oh, before I go, does this audio sound different when the MacBook is lower? I guess I could lower my chair a bit, because now looking at the angle, I think I might just live stream like this in the future. I was just curious if the audio being here makes any difference. But anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Bye-bye.